The 1950s brought us some of the most ambitious car designs in automotive history, but not every experiment was a success. These 15 vehicles represent the strangest, most problematic, and downright bizarre cars that rolled off production lines during this decade of automotive excess, from amphibious disasters to pink marketing nightmares. These are the cars that make you wonder what the engineers were thinking. Number 15, 1958 Buick, the chrome monster that killed a brand. The 1958 Buick stands as one of the most visually shocking cars ever produced by General Motors, featuring a grille made of 160 separate chrome squares that created what critics called a toothy grin. This wasn't just ugly, it was downright scary. To look at the front end resembled a chrome-plated shark, ready to devour anything in its path, while the rear featured thick, chrome-dripping fins that looked more like weapons than styling elements. This over-the-top design had devastating consequences for Buick. Sales plummeted to less than a third of what they were in 1955, and for the first time, Oldsmobile actually outsold Buick in 1958. Customers simply refused to buy a car that looked this aggressive and bizarre. The public rejection was so severe that GM completely redesigned and renamed their entire Buick lineup for 1959, making the 1958 model a one-year-only disaster. But the problems went beyond just looks. The 1958 Buick suffered from serious mechanical issues, including a cranking system that could fail in cold weather, leaving drivers stranded. The starter solenoid required precise adjustment, or it would create gear clash and hard starting problems. Even the electrical system was inadequate, with the generator unable to handle the full load at speeds below 25 miles per hour. The limited model came with a massive 364 cubic inch V8, producing 300 horsepower paired with a 2-speed automatic transmission. It could reach 60 miles per hour in 10 seconds and hit top speeds around 115 miles per hour. But all that performance meant nothing when customers wouldn't even consider buying such an unattractive car. The chrome excess wasn't limited to the grille. Every surface seemed to drip with chrome trim, creating a visual overload that made the car look more like a carnival ride than serious transportation. The interior featured chrome accents everywhere from the dashboard to the door handles, creating a blinding reflection problem on sunny days. Dealers struggled to move these cars off their lots, with many offering significant discounts. Just months after introduction, the resale value plummeted immediately, making early buyers feel foolish for purchasing what quickly became known as one of the ugliest cars ever made. The styling was so universally disliked that car magazines refused to feature the Buick in positive reviews. Number 14, Tatra T603, the three-eyed luxury oddball. From Czechoslovakia came one of the strangest luxury cars ever built. The Tatra T603, with its distinctive 3-headlamp front end that earned it the nickname Triclops. This wasn't just unusual styling, it was downright alien-looking. The central headlamp was designed to rotate with the front axle, creating an even more bizarre appearance when turning corners. The T603 featured a rear-mounted air-cooled V8 engine, which was unusual enough for a luxury car, but the real problem was its proportions. The front end was bulbous and oversized to house the luggage compartment, while the rear tapered dramatically due to the engine placement. This created a shape that looked more like a space pod than a traditional automobile. Inside the car could seat 6 people with the gear stick mounted on the steering column to accommodate a middle front passenger, but getting into this vehicle felt like climbing inside an egg. According to many who experienced it, the unusual proportions and strange styling made it look like nothing else on the road. The engineering was actually quite advanced for its time. Featuring independent suspension and later disc brakes on all 4 wheels, the air-cooled V8 weighed only 397 pounds and produced around 100 horsepower, allowing the car to reach speeds of 105 to 110 miles per hour. But none of this mattered when the car looked so bizarre that even Communist Party officials, who were the primary buyers, found it embarrassing to be seen in. The streamlined body was designed for aerodynamic efficiency, but created a bulbous appearance that many compared to a pregnant fish. The rear engine placement meant the car had unusual weight distribution that affected handling in ways drivers found unsettling. The steering felt disconnected from the road, while the braking required different techniques than conventional front-engine cars. Production ran from 1956 to 1975, with approximately 2,000 units built. but the T603 remains one of the oddest-looking luxury cars ever created. Its space-age design was simply too radical for most people to accept. Even in communist countries where citizens had limited automotive choices, the T603 was often avoided by those who could afford alternatives. The interior space was actually quite generous, with comfortable seating for 6 adults, but the unusual exterior proportions made passengers feel self-conscious about being seen in such a strange-looking vehicle. The car became a symbol of communist automotive engineering that prioritized function over conventional aesthetics. Number 13, Bond Minicar, the 3-wheeled death trap. The Bond Minicar represents everything wrong with trying to make cars as cheap as possible. This British 3-wheeler was powered by a tiny Villiers 2-stroke engine, producing just 5 horsepower in early models, making it slower than most bicycles. But speed wasn't the real problem here, it was the fundamental design flaws that made this car genuinely dangerous. The single front wheel configuration made the Bond Minicar incredibly unstable and prone to tipping over, especially when turning corners or encountering uneven road surfaces. The steering system used unreliable wire and bobbin controls that could fail without warning, leaving drivers unable to control the vehicle. The brakes operated only on the rear wheels, using basic cables that provided minimal stopping power. Early models lacked doors entirely, requiring occupants to step over low sides to enter and exit the vehicle. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was impractical for anyone wearing normal clothing or carrying packages. The aluminum body provided virtually no protection in case of an accident, and the mustard yellow and brown color scheme made the car look as cheap as it actually was. The Bond Minicar was classified as a motorcycle for tax and licensing purposes, which saved money but created a vehicle that combined the worst aspects of both cars and motorcycles. It had none of the protection or stability of a car, but also lacked the maneuverability and simplicity of a motorcycle. Despite continuous improvements throughout its production run, including the addition of doors and better steering systems, the fundamental flaws remained. The Bond Minicar was suitable only for very short trips in perfect weather conditions, making it more of a novelty than a practical vehicle. The ride quality was terrible, with every bump and pothole transmitted directly to passengers through the primitive suspension system. The engine noise was constant and annoying, while the lack of proper weather protection made driving in rain or cold weather nearly impossible. Production was limited to just 15 cars per week in early years, reflecting both limited demand and the company's inability to scale manufacturing. The low production numbers meant parts were expensive and difficult to obtain, making repairs costly relative to the car's low purchase price. Owners quickly discovered that the Bond Minicar was unsuitable for highway driving, where its instability and low power created dangerous situations. Traffic often treated it more like an obstacle than a legitimate vehicle, leading to frequent near-miss accidents. Number 12, Studebaker Starlight Coupe, the bullet nose controversy. Studebaker's 1950 champion. Starlight Coupe attempted to revolutionize automotive design with its radical bullet nose front end that looked more like an airplane than a car. This prominent center nose thrust forward aggressively, while the wraparound rear window and long horizontal deck created proportions unlike anything else on the road. The styling was so radical that it polarized potential buyers. Some found it innovative and futuristic, while others considered it bizarre and unappealing. The bullet nose design was Studebaker's attempt to lead the industry toward more flamboyant post-war styling, but it pushed the boundaries too far for mainstream acceptance. Powered by an inline 6-cylinder engine producing 85 horsepower, the Starlight Coupe could reach 80 miles per hour with an estimated 0 to 60 time of 20 seconds. These weren't impressive performance figures even for 1950, but the real issue was the styling that made potential buyers uncomfortable. The car featured a 3-speed manual transmission with optional overdrive and weighed between 2,700 and 2,945 pounds. The wheelbase measured 113 to 115.5 inches, creating proportions that emphasized the controversial nose design even more. While Studebaker aimed to capture buyers looking for something different, the Starlight Coupe's radical appearance ultimately hurt sales. The design was simply too far ahead of its time and too dramatic for conservative 1950s buyers who preferred more traditional automotive styling. The interior was conventional enough with standard bench seating and basic instrumentation, but passengers often felt embarrassed to be seen in such an unusual-looking vehicle. The bullet nose created aerodynamic benefits, but also made the car look like a rocket ship rather than practical transportation. Dealers reported that potential customers would examine the car with interest, but ultimately choose more conventional alternatives. The radical styling attracted attention, but not sales, as buyers worried about how they would be perceived driving such an unusual vehicle. The wraparound rear window provided excellent visibility, but created structural challenges that led to water leaks and wind noise problems. The unique proportions also made body repairs expensive and difficult when accident damage occurred. Number 11. Felbur Autoroller T400, the diagonal seating disaster. From Austria came one of the most impractical microcars ever conceived. The Felbur Autoroller T400 featured a bizarre seating arrangement that defied all logic. The conventional passenger seat was positioned diagonally behind and to the right of the driver, while a tiny child-sized seat sat behind the driver on the left. This created an awkward interior where passengers couldn't have normal conversations. The three-wheeled design used a rear-mounted 398cc Rotax two-cylinder engine, producing 15 horsepower, which barely provided enough power to move the vehicle. The early models featured cycle-type mudguards that swiveled with the front wheels, creating an even more peculiar appearance. All Autorollers were painted the same light green color using cheap industrial paint instead of proper automotive paint. This cost-cutting measure resulted in a finish that looked unprofessional and faded quickly. The overall appearance was so odd that the vehicle looked more like a custom-built prototype than a production car. Only about 400 units were ever built between 1952 and 1953, making the Autoroller extremely rare today. But this rarity comes from its commercial failure rather than any desirability. The unusual seating arrangement made it impractical for most people, while the three-wheeled configuration created stability issues. The Autoroller represents the extreme end of post-war austerity design, where cost-cutting and unusual solutions created a vehicle that was neither practical nor appealing. It solved no real transportation problems while creating entirely new ones. The diagonal seating meant that driver and passenger couldn't easily communicate, while the rear child seat was positioned so awkwardly that it was suitable only for very small children. The cramped interior made longer trips uncomfortable for all occupants. The three-wheeled configuration required special driving techniques to avoid tipping over during turns, while the rear-mounted engine created unusual weight distribution that made the vehicle difficult to control in emergency situations. The primitive suspension transmitted every road imperfection directly to passengers. Maintenance was complicated by the unusual engine placement and three-wheel design, which required specialized knowledge and tools that most mechanics didn't possess. Parts availability was always problematic due to the limited production numbers and unique components. Number 10. Biscuit, the reverse-less wonder. Spain's contribution to automotive oddity was the Biscuit, a microcar. So stripped down that it lacked basic features most people considered essential. Early models had no reverse gear, requiring drivers to manually push the car backward whenever they needed to back up. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was genuinely problematic in tight parking situations. The Biscuit featured a tubular frame with a fabric body powered by a single-cylinder two-stroke 197cc engine that sounded like a lawnmower. The braking system was unconventional and dangerous, applying stopping force only to the transmission and rear wheels through cables. This meant the front wheels had no braking power at all. Nicknamed Zapatilla or slipper due to its open-heeled appearance, the Biscuit embodied extreme minimalism. The monocoque body later switched from aluminum to steel for cost reasons, but this only made the already heavy vehicle even heavier while providing minimal additional strength or safety. Despite producing 9 horsepower, the Biscuit could reach 55 kilometers per hour, but getting there required patience and good weather conditions. The 3-speed transmission in later models finally included reverse gear, but this basic feature was considered an upgrade rather than standard equipment. Thousands were produced and sold in Spain, where economic conditions made even basic transportation valuable, but by 1960, competition from proper cars like Spanish-built Fiats caused sales to collapse. Most Biscuits were eventually scrapped, making survivors extremely rare today. The vehicle represents automotive design at its most basic level, where every possible feature was eliminated to reduce costs. This created a car that barely qualified as a car, while providing a driving experience that was more endurance test than transportation. The fabric body provided no protection from weather or minor accidents, while the basic frame offered minimal structural integrity in case of collision. The single-cylinder engine struggled with even modest hills, requiring drivers to plan routes carefully to avoid steep grades. Starting the engine required a pull cord similar to a lawnmower, which often failed to work in cold weather, or when the engine was hot. The primitive electrical system consisted of basic lighting with no charging system for the battery, meaning frequent replacement was necessary. The interior was Spartan, beyond belief, with basic bench seating and minimal instrumentation. The lack of a proper dashboard meant gauges were mounted wherever convenient while controls were positioned more for manufacturing ease than driver comfort. Weather protection was virtually non-existent, with a basic canvas top that provided minimal protection from rain or sun. Passengers often arrived at destinations wet, cold, or sunburned, depending on conditions during the journey. Number 9. GoGo Mobile Dart, the doorless sports car. Australia's attempt at creating an affordable sports car resulted in the GoGo Mobile Dart, a vehicle that prioritized style over practicality. To an absurd degree, the most obvious problem was the complete absence of doors requiring occupants to climb over the sides to enter or exit. This wasn't just inconvenient with the folding roof up, it required genuine athleticism. The Dart used reliable German GoGo Mobile running gear, including a rear-mounted air-cooled twin engine, initially 300cc, later upgraded to 400cc, producing 15 horsepower. The 4-speed manual transmission featured an unusual sideways throw with an upside-down back-to-front shift pattern that confused every new driver. Driving the Dart meant enduring constant loud engine noise that sounded like being chased by an angry lawnmower due to the air intake positioned just behind the driver's shoulder. The very light front end caused the car to pitch and bob constantly, while the swing axles and rear weight bias created dramatic oversteer when pushed hard. Weighing only 345 kilograms, the Dart was genuinely sporty for a microcar and could reach 85 kilometers per hour. But getting there was an adventure in itself. The lack of doors made highway driving uncomfortable due to wind buffeting, while the loud engine made conversation impossible. Despite these issues, the Dart became Australia's best-selling homegrown sports car until the 1980s, proving that low price could overcome significant practical shortcomings. Approximately 700 units were built, making it relatively rare today. The GoGo Mobile Dart represents misguided priorities in automotive design, where the desire to create something sporty and affordable resulted in a vehicle that was more novelty than practical transportation. The doorless design wasn't just impractical, it was dangerous in case of rollover accidents, where occupants could be thrown from the vehicle. The low sides that made entry difficult also provided minimal protection in side impact collisions. The unusual gear shift pattern required extensive practice to master, with new drivers frequently selecting wrong gears during critical moments. The rear engine placement created unpredictable handling characteristics that caught inexperienced drivers off guard. Weather protection was minimal, with the folding soft top providing limited coverage during rain or intense sun. The lack of side windows meant passengers were exposed to wind noise and road debris while driving on highways. The small fuel tank required frequent stops, while the basic suspension made longer trips uncomfortable for both driver and passenger. The lack of storage space meant carrying luggage was virtually impossible, making the Dart suitable only for short recreational drives. Number 8. Messormidt KR200, the aircraft wannabe. When aircraft manufacturer Messerschmitt decided to build cars, they created the KR200, a vehicle that took aircraft design principles too literally. The transparent acrylic bubble canopy and tandem seating arrangement positioned the passenger directly behind the driver like in a fighter plane, but this configuration made normal conversation impossible. The most bizarre feature was the reverse mechanism to go backward. The engine had to be completely stopped and restarted by pushing the ignition key further in, causing it to run in reverse. This meant the car had the same 4-gear ratios available in reverse as forward, but the process was time-consuming and impractical. Instead of a steering wheel, the KR200 used an aircraft-style steering bar that swiveled about its axis. This provided extremely direct response, but felt alien to anyone accustomed to normal car controls. The narrow body design and lack of conventional doors meant drivers had to climb in and out over the side like entering a cockpit. Powered by a 191cc single-cylinder 2-stroke engine, producing just under 10 horsepower, the KR200 could reach about 65 miles per hour. The narrow frontal area and centralized mass actually provided good handling characteristics, but the aircraft-inspired controls made the driving experience unlike any other car. Production peaked at nearly 12,000 units in the first year, but declined rapidly as the German economy improved and buyers could afford more conventional vehicles. The KR200 was eventually discontinued in 1964 when demand for such unusual transportation disappeared. Over 30,000 units were built during the production run, making it relatively successful for a microcar, but the aircraft-inspired design elements created more problems than they solved. The bubble canopy created greenhouse effects during sunny weather, making the interior uncomfortably hot while providing no ventilation system to address the problem. Passengers often arrived at destinations sweating and uncomfortable. The tandem seating made the car unsuitable for families or couples who wanted to communicate during travel. The passenger behind the driver had limited visibility and felt isolated from the driving experience. The aircraft-style controls required extensive learning period for new drivers who found the steering bar counterintuitive compared to conventional steering wheels. The unusual control layout made emergency maneuvers difficult and unpredictable. Starting and stopping the engine for reverse gear changes was not only inconvenient, but potentially dangerous in traffic situations where quick reversing might be necessary. The complex process often stalled the engine, leaving drivers stranded in awkward positions. Number 7. BMW Isetta, the backwards door bubble. BMW's Isetta became an icon of microcar design, but its unusual features created practical problems that owners had to endure daily. The single front opening door that took the steering wheel and instrument panel with it was novel but impractical, especially when parking close to walls or other vehicles. Early models completely lacked reverse gear, requiring owners to manually push the car backward using a special handle. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was genuinely problematic in tight spaces or on hills. The rear track was made extremely narrow, with wheels positioned very close together to eliminate the need for a differential. But this created stability issues. The 298cc four-stroke single-cylinder engine derived from BMW's motorcycle division produced 13 horsepower, allowing a top speed of 53 miles per hour, while achieving up to 67 miles per gallon. Fuel economy was excellent, but highway driving was genuinely dangerous due to the low power and light weight. Getting in and out of the Isetta felt more like entering a refrigerator than a car. The door mechanism was clever but impractical for daily use, especially when carrying packages or wearing bulky clothing. The bubble shape provided maximum interior space for the wheelbase, but created proportions that looked cartoonish. Despite these quirks, over 16,000 units were produced globally, making the Isetta relatively successful. The combination of extreme fuel efficiency and low cost appealed to post-war European buyers who prioritized economy over conventional comfort or appearance. The Isetta represents microcar design at its most extreme, where every conventional automotive feature was reconsidered to minimize cost and size, but this created a vehicle that required significant compromises from its users. The single front door created serious safety concerns in case of rear-end collisions where occupants might be trapped inside. With no escape route, the narrow rear track made the car unstable in crosswinds or when carrying uneven loads. The motorcycle-derived engine required frequent maintenance and was sensitive to weather conditions. Cold starting was particularly problematic, while hot weather caused overheating issues that left drivers stranded. The minimal ground clearance meant the Isetta was unsuitable for rough roads or areas with poor pavement drainage, causing the car to scrape bottom frequently and sustain damage from normal driving conditions. Storage space was virtually non-existent, with barely enough room for a small bag behind the seats. This made the car unsuitable for shopping trips or any journey requiring luggage or supplies. Number 6. Amphar 770, the amphibious compromise. The Amphar attempted to combine a car and boat into one vehicle, but succeeded at being neither. The model designation, 770, referred to its top speeds, 7 knots in water and 70 miles per hour on land, but actual testing revealed it could barely achieve 65 miles per hour on roads while struggling to maintain 7 knots in calm water. Powered by a rear-mounted 1147cc Triumph Herald engine producing 43 horsepower, the Amphar was severely underpowered for both purposes. On land, it felt sluggish and wallowing, with a 0 to 60 time of 43 seconds that made it slower than most economy cars in water. It was barely faster than a rowboat. The amphibious capability required massive compromises. The reinforced waterproof body weighed 2,300 pounds, making the car feel heavy and unresponsive. The necessary height for water entry and exit maintained 21 inches of freeboard, but created awkward proportions that hurt road handling. Steering was described as vague, while the brakes required enormous effort to achieve minimal stopping power. The billowy and wobbling ride quality made highway driving unpleasant, while the complex drivetrain system for both land and water operation created reliability concerns. Maintenance requirements were extreme after every water excursion. The Amphar needed greasing in 13 places, some requiring removal of rear seats. This wasn't weekend maintenance. It was a major undertaking that discouraged actual amphibious use. Priced at $33,995, the Amphar cost more than a new Mustang convertible, which buyers overwhelmingly preferred. Only 3878 units were produced between 1961 and 1968, making it extremely rare today. But this rarity reflects commercial failure rather than desirability. The Amphar proves that attempting to combine two completely different vehicle types usually results in something that excels at neither purpose. The waterproofing systems were prone to failure, leading to water intrusion that could damage electrical components and create safety hazards. The propeller mechanism was vulnerable to damage from underwater obstacles, while the rudder system was inadequate for precise water navigation. Launching and retrieving the Amphar required special ramps and careful technique that many owners never mastered. The process was time-consuming and often attracted unwanted attention from curious onlookers who gathered to watch the spectacle. The dual-purpose design meant compromise in both safety systems, with automotive safety features inadequate for water use, while marine safety equipment was insufficient for highway driving. This created dangerous situations in both environments. Corrosion was a constant problem, especially for vehicles used in saltwater environments where the metal components deteriorated rapidly. Despite claims of waterproof construction, most Amphars developed leaks that made water use risky. Number 5. Renault Doofi, the Rust Bucket Express. While successful in Europe, the Renault Doofi became a cautionary tale about adapting vehicles for different markets. When it reached North America, the car's fundamental design proved completely unsuitable for American driving conditions and climate. Road and Track magazine recorded a sluggish 0 to 60 acceleration time of 32 seconds, making the Doofi one of the slowest cars available. This performance was barely acceptable on narrow European roads, but wholly inadequate for American highways, where higher speeds were normal. The corrosion problems were catastrophic. Reports described front wings resembling net curtains after just one winter of driving on salt-strewn New York roads. This rapid deterioration occurred because the car wasn't designed for harsh North American weather conditions or the extensive use of road salt. Time magazine delivered the devastating assessment that the Doofi was the most ineffective bit of French engineering since the Maginot Line. This comparison to France's failed World War II defensive strategy captured public perception of the car's fundamental inadequacy. The H445cc engine produced only 30 horsepower, while the car weighed 1,324 pounds. The 4-speed manual transmission was optional, with most cars receiving 3-speed units that further hampered already poor performance. The 89-inch wheelbase and 155-inch length created proportions that looked reasonable, but disguised the mechanical inadequacies. Renault was eventually forced to issue public apologies in American advertisements, explicitly marketing the successor Renault 8 as the car for people who swore they wouldn't buy another Renault. This desperate attempt to distance the new model from the Doofi's reputation demonstrated the depth of damage. Over 2 million Dauphins were produced globally, but the North American experience created lasting negative impressions that haunted Renault for decades. The cooling system was inadequate for American summer conditions, causing frequent overheating and stop-and-go traffic. The rear-mounted engine placement made access for repairs difficult and expensive, while parts availability was sporadic through the limited dealer network. The electrical system was notoriously unreliable, with frequent failures of lights gauges and starting systems. The wiring harness was inadequately protected from moisture, leading to shorts and fires that sometimes destroyed the entire vehicle. Build quality was inconsistent, with panel gaps and paint defects visible on new cars, while interior components like door handles and window mechanisms failed regularly. The synthetic materials used for interior trim cracked and faded quickly in sunlight. The suspension was too soft for American road conditions, causing excessive body roll and poor handling. While the weak brakes were inadequate for panic stops, the steering was imprecise and required constant correction to maintain straight-line driving. Number 4. Dodge La Femme, the patronizing pink disaster. Dodge's La Femme represented one of the most misguided marketing strategies in automotive history, designed exclusively for women. The car featured pink and white or orchid two-tone paint schemes, with interiors decorated with pink rosebuds or lavender patterns. This wasn't just feminine styling, it was aggressively stereotypical. The matching accessories included a calfskin purse containing compact lipstick, cigarette case, comb lighter, and change purse that stored in a dedicated compartment behind the passenger seat, a matching raincoat, rain bonnet, and umbrella made from vinyl patterned to match the interior fabric. Filled another compartment behind the driver. The marketing tagline by special appointment to Her Majesty the American Woman revealed the condescending attitude behind the concept. Dodge assumed women wanted cars specifically designed for them rather than the freedom to choose their own options, engines, transmissions, and colors. Contemporary reports revealed that women resented being presented with a car specifically designed for women, preferring to make their own automotive choices without gender-based restrictions. This fundamental misunderstanding of the target market doomed the La Femme from the start. Only an estimated 2,500 units were built over 2 years, making the La Femme extremely rare today, but this rarity reflects market rejection rather than exclusivity. Dealers reportedly offered very little for trade-ins, adding financial loss to the social embarrassment of owning such a stereotypical vehicle. The La Femme was available only with V8 engines and automatic transmissions, priced as a premium option package on custom Royal Lancer models. The 270 cubic inch V8 produced 183 horsepower, while optional 315 cubic inch versions offered up to 340 horsepower with 4-barrel carburetors. This commercial disaster demonstrated that assumptions about what women wanted in automobiles were completely wrong, and that successful marketing requires understanding rather than stereotyping target audiences. The pink color schemes were difficult to maintain, with touch-up paint nearly impossible to match. Exactly, minor scratches and dings were highly visible against the unusual colors, making the cars look shabby quickly. The matching accessories were impractical and cheaply made, with the vinyl items cracking and fading within months of purchase. The special compartments took up valuable storage space while providing little actual utility for daily driving. Male family members were often embarrassed to drive the La Femme, creating household conflicts and limiting the car's usefulness as family transportation. The stereotypical styling made it unsuitable for business use where professional appearance was important. The special interior materials were delicate and difficult to clean, with the rosebud pattern showing dirt and stains easily. The custom upholstery was expensive to repair when damaged and nearly impossible to replace with matching materials. Number 3. Nash Metropolitan, the miniature mistake. Nash's Metropolitan represented an early attempt to introduce compact cars to America, but fundamentally misunderstood what American buyers wanted in the 1950s, marketed as a luxurious big car in miniature, and targeted specifically at women as a motorized shopping cart. The Metropolitan failed to capture the market Nash envisioned. Developed in cooperation with British Austin Motors and manufactured at their Longbridge plant, the Metropolitan became the first American-designed car built overseas. But this distinction meant little when the end product disappointed buyers with poor performance handling and reliability. The fixed bench seat couldn't be adjusted, creating practical problems for shorter drivers attempting to reach the pedals comfortably. Faulty gauges and various mechanical malfunctions plagued the car throughout its production run, making ownership an exercise in frustration. Powered by a 1489cc inline 4-cylinder engine producing just 47 horsepower, the Metropolitan struggled to keep pace with traffic. The 3-speed manual transmission and 1,785-pound weight created a driving experience described as lackluster and challenging. The Metropolitan's inability to compete with more popular models like the Ford Falcon and Chevrolet Corvair highlighted its fundamental flaws. American buyers in the 1950s equated larger cars with status and success, making the Metropolitan's compact size a liability rather than an advantage. Approximately 95,000 units were produced globally, with only 9,300 sold in Europe, demonstrating limited international appeal. The car's failure in multiple markets proved that the concept was flawed, rather than just poorly executed for specific regions. While the Metropolitan's visual appeal was often acknowledged, the compromised functionality and poor driving experience overshadowed any aesthetic charm. This balance between appearance and performance clearly favored conventional, full-size American cars. The build quality suffered from the overseas manufacturing arrangement with British production standards. Differing from American expectations, panel fit was poor, while paint quality was inconsistent, leading to early deterioration and rust problems. The heating and ventilation systems were inadequate for American climate conditions, leaving passengers uncomfortable in both hot and cold weather. The small windows and poor airflow made summer driving particularly unpleasant. The Metropolitan's small size made it unsuitable for American parking spaces designed for larger vehicles, while highway driving was genuinely dangerous due to the car's inability to maintain safe speeds in traffic. Parts and service were problematic, with many American mechanics unfamiliar with the British components, while parts availability was sporadic through the limited dealer network. This made routine maintenance expensive and time-consuming. Number 2. Ford Edsil, the marketing disaster of the decade. Ford's Edsil represents the most spectacular automotive failure of the 1950s, combining strategic miscalculation, quality problems, and unfortunate timing into a perfect storm of commercial disaster. The car was positioned to fill a perceived gap between Ford and Lincoln models, but by launch time, that market segment was actually shrinking. The aggressive marketing campaign created unprecedented anticipation, with Ford investing millions in teaser advertisements, promising to revolutionize the automotive industry. This high-stakes approach set expectations that no car could meet, especially one with the Edsil's numerous problems. The distinctive vertical horse-collar grille became an immediate target of mockery, widely compared to a toilet seat. This polarizing design element dominated the car's appearance and became a symbol of everything wrong with the Edsil program. Quality control issues plagued early production, with reports of transmission failures, stuck trunk lids peeling paint, and vehicles arriving at dealerships with missing parts. Assembly line workers reportedly resented being forced to integrate Edsil production, leading to potential sabotage or neglect. The timing couldn't have been worse. Launching in September 1957, just as a recession began, American consumers tightened spending and prioritized value over novelty. The Edsil's confusing pricing strategy overlapped with existing Ford and Mercury models, while appearing expensive compared to discounted 1957 models. Powered by various V8 engines, including a 410 cubic inch unit producing 345 horsepower, the Edsil offered genuine performance with innovative features like push-button transmission controls, but mechanical sophistication couldn't overcome fundamental market rejection. Only 11,847 total units were produced, with the rare Corsair model accounting for just 19,305 examples. The entire program cost Ford an estimated $250 million, equivalent to $2.5 billion in today's economy. The Edsil disaster became a business school case study in how market research, strategic planning, and quality control failures can destroy even the most ambitious automotive programs. The push-button transmission controls were revolutionary, but unreliable, often failing to engage gears properly or selecting wrong gears without warning. This created dangerous situations where drivers lost control during critical moments. The Teletouch system mounted transmission controls in the steering wheel hub, but the buttons were poorly designed and often stuck or activated accidentally. The system was so problematic that many owners had it replaced with conventional column shifters. Dealer preparation was inadequate, with many Edsils reaching customers with incomplete assembly or missing components. This created immediate negative impressions that damaged the brand's reputation from day one. The extensive option list made pricing confusing, with similarly equipped Edsils often costing more than comparable Fords or Mercurys. This pricing overlap cannibalized sales from Ford's existing lines while failing to attract new customers. Number 1. Arocar, the flying refrigerator fiasco. The Arocar represents the ultimate automotive absurdity, an attempt to create a flying car that succeeded at being neither a good car nor a good airplane designed by Moulton Taylor. In 1949, this roadable aircraft earned the unflattering nickname Flying Refrigerator due to its bizarre appearance and questionable engineering. The folding wings allowed conversion from road to flight mode in 5 minutes, with wings and tail unit towed behind the vehicle. When driving, this complex mechanism added weight, complexity, and countless failure points while creating a vehicle that looked ridiculous in both configurations. Powered by a 140 horsepower Lycoming engine that drove front wheels through a 3-speed manual transmission on the road and a pusher propeller in flight, the Arocar managed 60 miles per hour on roads and 110 miles per hour in the air. These modest speeds in both elements highlighted the fundamental compromises. Road performance was genuinely terrible, with disproportionately small wheels contributing to awkward appearance and poor handling. The takeoff process was so challenging that pilots questioned their life choices, while safety was described as non-existent. The engineering was so questionable that even the inventor admitted it was more proof of concept than practical vehicle. Despite gaining civil certification in 1956, the Arocar never achieved production. Taylor needed 500 orders to begin manufacturing, but secured only half that number. Only 6 examples were ever built, making the Arocar extremely rare today. But this rarity reflects complete commercial failure rather than any desirability. The vehicle represented ambitious vision undermined by fundamental engineering and practical problems. The Arocar proves that some automotive concepts are simply too ambitious to work. Combining two completely different vehicle types created something that excelled at neither purpose, while adding complexity, danger, and impracticality. The conversion process from car to airplane required specialized knowledge and tools that typical owners didn't possess. The wing attachment points were critical safety components that could fail catastrophically if not properly secured. The towing arrangement for wings and tail created additional hazards on public roads, with the long trailer limiting maneuverability and creating blind spots. The attachment system was complex and prone to failure, potentially causing accidents. Ground handling was extremely difficult with the small wheels and unusual weight distribution. Making steering unpredictable, the braking system was inadequate for both automotive and aircraft applications, creating dangerous situations in both environments. The cockpit design prioritized aircraft function over automotive comfort, making road driving cramped and uncomfortable, while providing inadequate protection from weather and road hazards. The visibility was poor for ground operations. Flight characteristics were equally problematic, with questionable stability and control response that made the aircraft dangerous for inexperienced pilots. The certification process was lengthy and expensive, while insurance costs were prohibitive. These 15 vehicles from the 1950s represent automotive ambition gone wrong, serving as prime examples of how the pursuit of innovation can sometimes lead to unintended disaster. Each one demonstrates how pushing boundaries without fully considering practical limitations, market demands, or even basic functionality can result in vehicles that are remembered not for their greatness, but for their flaws. The 1950s was a decade defined by post-war optimism, booming economies, and a strong belief in technological progress. Car manufacturers embraced this spirit, eager to wow the public with futuristic designs, experimental features, and cutting-edge engineering concepts that promised to revolutionize personal transportation. However, this enthusiasm often came at a cost. In many cases, these vehicles sacrificed reliability, safety, and usability in favor of bold styling or unproven technologies. Some suffered from serious mechanical problems, while others failed to resonate with consumers due to odd looks or impractical features. These vehicles, once hailed as visionary, quickly became cautionary tales that highlighted the importance of balancing creativity with sound engineering and market awareness. Despite their failures, these cars have earned a lasting place in automotive history. They remind us that innovation must be guided by thoughtful design and a clear understanding of what drivers truly need. Often, it is the missteps, those grand experiments that didn't work out, that provide the most valuable lessons for future generations of designers and engineers. These 15 vehicles illustrate that in the world of automobiles, the most interesting and enduring stories are not always about the greatest successes. Instead, it is often the boldest failures that spark curiosity, inspire future improvements, and leave an indelible mark on the evolution of automotive design.